Yep. 3, 2, 1. Hey, greetings, fam. This your bro, Antoni Bo. We appreciate you coming on this journey with us as we continue to analyze life and see how life applies in our individual lives and how it impacts the collective. Last episode, we was speaking about mashed potatoes and then connecting it to mashed potatoes in the sky and how mashed potatoes was such a comfort food for myself. My mother used to fix that food and have me feeling good and making me feel like a champion. That food would end up being almost like the soundtrack to my life and how I named it mashed potatoes in the sky. Last time I was speaking with you, we were having a conversation in my timeline where my stepdad and my mother got married. And in them getting married, they end up, I think, married for 9 months. And after the 9 months, he ended up being murdered. You know, it was real scary for me because the men who murdered him was on the loose, and they had not caught him. And they had been to my home. And so they were in close proximity. They knew where we lived. Like they had all this information about us, but I was 11. I didn't know too much about them. And I remember just being real scared of just the circumstance and the men. And so, again, I remember wanting to live with my uncle, but not wanting to leave my mother. I really had to make a decision to really tough that one out. What it did for me, it gave me a lot of life, I would say PTSD. It really developed in me just, I kind of felt like in life, I didn't want to feel too high on something or get too happy about a thing because, I kind of felt like, it was always something around the corner that was going to tear that down. And I guess I was trying to protect my energy and trying to protect my feelings or protect my heart. It's real interesting because where I come from, and I think in a lot of generations of cultures where people live, the men feel like, they can't really investigate their heart, and study, all these degrees to their heart and their lifeline and where they've come from. I feel like I'm a pretty tough guy, but if you can't identify where you're at and how the circumstances of life have shaped where you're at and what you're presenting from, in reflection of where you've been, then I think you're really doing yourself a life disservice. So you have to reflect and study what you've been through, and then also, and even probably more importantly, learn how to articulate it back out. It's very important. So here's in part, the continuation of my articulation of that time. My stepfather again got murdered, and I'm in the neighborhood, and I felt very vulnerable. I felt very scared, and my big brother, he wasn't there. He was in authorities. He was in the youth authority, right? And so I had to like endure it on my own. And I didn't have nobody like really in my peer group, to kind of run to, feel like, I had that type of protection or even that type of counsel. Because notice, even within this whole journey, even up until this day, what you all would call counseling for this situation, I've never had counseling. I felt like I lived a lot of movies, and there's a lot to unpack, in looking at this. And so, my big brother wasn't there. It was just my mother. I thank God for my mother, she was very tough, but I think on that too, it was it's my mother. And so, if I was going through all these things and what's going on, she already has a son who's in the youth authorities over some different crimes, and then she has her husband that ends up murdered. I'm pretty sure, without her showing it to me as much, she was going through it a lot. I just remember from there, I was growing up, and the outgoing Antoni Bow, the outgoing, it was starting to fall back, and I just started becoming very pessimistic and very hard. And I didn't like the feeling of my heart being so vulnerable and my feelings being so vulnerable. So I start to put on, like this overlay of hardness. Like we got this thing in the neighborhood, we call it a mean mug. And so we used to listen to the song that kind of came out a little later by this artist named E40. And it was a song called Practice Looking Hard. It says, I keep a mirror in my pocket and I practice looking hard. And what that meant was you had to perfect your defense system, right? For me. So, I'm looking in the mirror and I'm practicing just, how menacing I can make my face look, but I really was doing it to keep predators away. I wasn't doing it on the attack. I was just trying to keep the predators away. So, but what I end up doing in manipulating my own self and tricking my own self, I started to become what I was trying to get away from. I would practice my mean mug, and I get my face all mean, and then, my heart and, the way I think on things. And, I would try to get you before you got me, which then maybe turned into maybe you was never trying to get me, but whatever I perceive, to be such, then that's how we're going to define it. And then that's how I'm going to get on you, right? I was developing at 12, 13, 14. And then also, let me share this point. At that time, then here come the LA gangs that was coming from Los Angeles, California, and they start to migrate into our neighborhood. Now my neighborhood starts to become part of this politic of this gang culture. And so I had all these life circumstances that was pressing down upon me that was so contrary to my original upbringing. Just a happy-go-lucky kid that comes from generations of these country folks from Arkansas, and we just in the street having fun. And now the gangs come. Now I have certain stripes that would give me excuse to fall into the gang because I've had adversities and troubles. My brother's gone. My stepfather was murdered. I remember feeling vengeance. It was this one time, I remember we were out front. I was about 15 years old and was out front of my house. And I always heard about this story about one of the brothers of the men who ended up murdering my stepfather. He was paralyzed and he was in a wheelchair. And so I remember this one day, these men was coming up the street. I was 15. So that incident when he was murdered, I was 11. And then I was 15 and he was coming up the street. And then somebody said, hey, I think that's the brother of the one who did that to your stepdad. And I remember I ran off the porch and I started attacking the fella in the wheelchair. The fella in the wheelchair had nothing to do with what was going on. But I set the offense, meaning in him, listen real good, because I know for a fact this is what we do in America pertaining unto race and culture. I placed all my negative effects and all my trials and all my anxiety and all my fears inside of vengeance, and he was the face of it. Didn't matter if he wasn't the one who did it. What mattered was I need a release. And he represented that release. He was the closest thing in proximity, so I had to go attack him. So I remember running down there, and I remember cutting up in his face. I don't even think I said much. I remember wielding back to hit him, because by this time I'm 15. Get a little hair on your face, a little hair on your chest. Now you in the mirror doing this, right? Flexion your chest. I can touch the rim. I can about dunk now, basketball, right? Pretty fast too when I run. You know what I'm saying? A little young lady winked her eye at me too before, so that means I got a little attraction to me now. So it's all these reaffirming strengths that make me believe, oh, I can handle this. Let me go out here and vent this, and he can't do nothing about it. And so I go, and it took my partners, who was my neighbors, to grab me and basically pull me by the neck and pull me back from not attacking this dude. And then the other one was like, man, y'all get out of here. Y'all get out of here. And the dude was pushing, was like, he was really pushing him down the street all fast. I don't know what I would have did with that dude, because that was 4 years of frustration. I thank God that it went down like that, because, I might have not been able to be sitting right here today if that situation was to go down. But that's how much I was feeling it in the pit of my being, and how scared I was. I wanted him to feel what I felt for that last 4 years of that situation. And then when I think about it, it wasn't even just that. Because I wasn't just frustrated about my stepfather. I was frustrated about my brother too. Because just as much, I wanted my brother to be there. And I needed the protection from him. So I was mad he wasn't there. I was mad at my brother for what he did to make him not be able to be there. How is it that you couldn't anticipate, bro, that this was going to happen and you weren't even there? So I was just angry. I was so angry. I was an angry guy at that time through my teenage years. And so with that, I never joined the gang, but definitely made sure that I had enough attention from them to be affiliated to where I can have certain protection in my neighborhood or my community and where we lived, in the politics of where we lived. And so me and my buddies, we were affiliated. We would hang with them at these times or not. And, this just kind of became the lifestyle. And, if you don't fit in somewhere and then life circumstances pushes you out culturally, we're all looking for affirmation. At the end of the day, like this show is called Antoni to Bo, right? And Antoni being the given name I was given by birth, but I never went by that name because I was ashamed of the name because nobody else had the name, right? And so I was looking at outward affirmation from the group. Call me what would be acceptable within the group, because I did not know how to stand on my own 2 feet as I was growing up. Now, as you don't learn that through the years, it just starts to stack. Next thing you know, I'm looking for affirmation in all the wrong places. And now I start to become, that climate, right? And so now I'm starting to do things to try to please that climate. And now I have totally forgotten who I am at the root and how I was raised. So I remember my brother, he got released 89, I think it was, 90. He went back in again. This time he went to prison. It wasn't youth authorities now. He went to prison. And I remember he went in, I think for 7 years. And I remember it just, Lord, it just depressed me, man. Remember, I wasn't getting no therapy. I was just depressed. Went from being a tag student to, not being interested in school. I remember one time, one of my best friends, I used to be so ashamed. I used to tell my friend that he was in college. And my brother was gone. He was going to college somewhere, long away, somewhere. I think this is the first time I said that to this day. I used to tell him that. I didn't know how to articulate it. And if you don't know how to articulate it, that means you're not counseling it well. And so he went for the 7 years. And literally it depressed me to the point where I was a tag student, good grades, top scores in the city on the state tests. School's easy too. I had no interest in learning at all. None. I remember I used to sleep a lot. And when I woke, I would wake just to kind of kick it in the social settings and outings. But school, that wasn't my thing no more. Fast forward, I remember my bro, he got out. I think he went in 89. He got out 1996, 97, somewhere in there. I remember when he got out, I was thinking to myself, man, so I was 8, 96, so 22. So the last 14 years, he's been in and out of authority, right? And I'm thinking like, man, he's been in and out of authority longer than me and him have been free on the outside and just hung as brothers. Like 14 years to 8 years, right? And so I know what was big to me was, okay, I hope this is it. And we're just going to build from here. And I'm going to finally, I'm going to get my bro. Because I need my bro. I'm going to finally get my bro. Like I have other brothers and sisters, but this is my bro, right? This is the brother that my dad and my mom had together, me and him. So this is my bro, right? I felt like in 96, I felt like I was of age and maybe had enough experience to kind of hang with him. Now we can kind of be like peers, right? When you have that big gap in that age, you're not as much peers. I was probably more so of a burden to him. Like I really couldn't hang, with him and his friends so much. But now, we're kind of an age and peers. So I was determined, like, all right, he gonna roll with me. Hey man, ain't roll. You can't say ain't roll. I'm pretty cool, man. I'm pretty cool. I got my little ride, I got my little rims, my system, and I'm pretty cool, man. Fast forward it to 2001, 2002. And I'll never forget. I was going to work. And I was going to drop my sons off to a family member's house who was going to keep them while I'm at work. And I get in the car. I leave my street and I drive up the street, right? And I remember driving up the street, and I don't know if it's like Ford Tauruses, like the like all these unmarked vehicles just lined up, like all the way down the street. And the one in the front rolled by me, stopped me, told me to roll my window down. Hey, you Antoni Bo? I'm like, yup. They're like, hey, need you to turn around and go back to your house. I said, okay. So I turn around, I go back to the house. Next thing you know, all those cars turn on my block. And they all park, probably about 10 cars. They all park. They all get out. They got their little jackets on. It's the authorities, it's the police, and whatever else they called, right? We go into the house, and they tell me, you got to find a place to sit. And I said, okay. And so I get in that place. They said, are you cool being right there? Because once we established that you're cool being right there, they said you can't move for the rest of the period. For the rest of the time, you can't move. I said, all right, I'm cool right here. And I got on my couch. Then they handed me this sheet, which was a search warrant. And they tell me the search warrant is for this, where they're looking for items for my bruh that's consistent to connect to the murder of this and this. All I'm thinking about is all those years from since I was 8 years old is about to go all down the drain. All that little cycle. Remember, I had PTSD. So it's like I slivered in this last bit of hope for me and my brother. And in that, with that line and him handing me that paper, it just slapped me in the face. You know, they say the name. When they give you the warrant thing, it has all of it listed on the names and everything of who it is, all that. It's all on there. They tell you exactly what they're here looking for. Remember, they took my sons out in the backyard and I was playing football with them. Then they was like, all right, everybody get started. And they just in my crib. They in your house. Where ain't nobody else at. You know, they in your room. They everywhere. They going through everything. There's no part of your house on a search warrant. There's no part of your house that ain't touched. They going through everything. I remember this plain as day. They had asked me before, okay, you want the TV on? I said, yes. They said, what do you want it on? I said, can you turn it on the basketball game? Because I think, if I remember, it was the Eastern Conference Finals. It was the New Jersey Nets versus the Boston Celtics. My team is the Lakers. So if y'all remember the Lakers won the third of their championship, of their three-peat with Kobe and Shaq. Well, it was the third one. You know, they beat the Pacers and the 76ers, and the third one they beat the Nets. Well, this was the Nets and the Celtics playing to see who was going to go to that championship round. And so they put it on the TV, NBC, had the basketball game on. And I remember while they were searching, probably 15 minutes in, the news, Channel 8 News, interrupted the game. Bow. And it turned the game off, It says, we have breaking news. And then they put up the picture of the person that was murdered. And then they put the picture up of my brother. We have apprehended the murderer of, and then the whole screen is just my brother's face. Next thing I know, bling, 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 bling. My phone starts ringing. I remember my first instinct was they said, nope, you can't move. So what I had to do, I had to sit there and listen to my phone ring for 2 hours straight, nonstop. 2 hours straight. My phone just rang and rang and rang and rang. You know, people watching the game, that pops up. They calling trying to see what's up. They get done doing what they needed to do. And what just kept hitting me was, you know, this is like, man, this is how it ends. This is how it ends. This is how it ends. So, all right, I get the 8 years, now 96, and then 2001, 2002. Okay, 5 more years. Okay, so I got 13 years, but not consecutive. You know, I got 8 gap, and then like I'm 8 years old, and then like the other 5 I get a gap. I'm 22 then. So it ain't even a constant grow up. It's, and I said, this is how this thing is. And then I went into a deeper depression. Actually, you know, I'm drinking, straight up trying to numb the pain. If it wasn't for me getting introduced to my faith, I about still been. But my faith slowly but surely helped develop me into one of the biggest things too was so only the faith, the creator of the faith, could set this up. One of the bras in the church I was going to end up being one of the people that was on the jury for my brother's jury. And it's amazing because they convicted him and then they put him on trial for the death penalty. And they have voted 11-1. And the one person that voted to not put him to death is the one person that ended up, once I got to this church, being the brother that was going to the church that was on his jury. I remember when I got to the church, he just kept looking at me. And he finally came to me. He's like, man, where do I know you from? Then one day he just said my brother's name. He said, are you? And I said, yeah. And I said, hold up, man. Was that you on the... He said, yeah. And then he gives me all the background, what was going on behind the scenes. He lays it all out. And he was the one vote. He's passed away now. Much love to him. Brother Jacob. Amazing how what I end up being in of what it is that preserved me from not spiraling is what end up giving mercy to my bruh, to give him the opportunity, in hope to rectify that situation. But they gave him prison and they put him in jail for life without parole. Life, man, is wild, man. You can be thinking you're doing real wonderful. Real wonderful. And the next thing you know, it ain't going too well, man. But I will say this. If you look up in that sky, them clouds are very gray, right? Overcast, very gray. And then all of a sudden, you'll see the clouds start to release the rain, right? Rain just coming down, wetting up everything. And that cloud start to lose its gray color, right? Because now here comes the sun. Now starts to beat through the cloud, right? And when you see the sun beating through the cloud, you start to see how the cloud starts to, fold itself over into itself. And it becomes very fluffy and white and rich and kind of like mashed potatoes. And then from there, the sun keeps on beating. Then eventually the cloud starts to dissipate. And then all you see is blue skies. That's why I called it mashed potatoes in the skies, family. Because where there's life, there's hope. And I'm a testament that I felt like I have lived multiple horror movies. But we're thankful that we're still here. Not only just still here, but able to take all that what I seen that I thought would destroy me, but I was able to counsel it within myself, and not only counsel it, but now we're able to use it to articulate it back out to help everyone else out. Because that same sun that makes that fluffy cloud and makes the mashed potatoes in the sky, that's the same sun that's here. LA, Chicago, San Antonio, Dallas, Louisiana, New York, Florida, West Virginia, Washington, Montana, South Dakota, North Dakota, Africa, Europe, Greenland, Madagascar. That same sun. One, it tells us it's shining up for everybody. And if it's shining up for everybody, then everybody have some type of mashed potatoes in the sky. You just got to learn what is your comfort food. And you need comfort from what? And then look at the hope and have the sun or the light do the rest. Wonderful A to B family. We appreciate you coming on this ride. We want to set the tone for you. We promise you from now here on out, we got no excuse. We didn't set the tone from you. I came and gave all my vulnerabilities. Now we're going to start getting you. Because it's time to dive real deep into some racing culture talk. All right? We're good? Hey! Peace be. See you, fam.